I'm just curious to know how the real guys came, who came to Earth, like all of us, and they had to work through all the restrictions and limitations on this level of life. So, how did they gain their status? Uh, does it mean that the concept of the is was known by them at the time? So, then what were they teaching the world that the world has? What were they teaching that the world has only come into the fullness of the is in this new nowness? So I'm a little perplexed by this consideration, by this thought, and I would like to know from Duane whether the concept of the isness has always been, or it has just come into the fullness now, and then, if so, when the real guides came to this level of life as they normally started like us. So what kind of education were they given? Did they have all? In fact, I'm a little confused, so I would like Dwayne to shed some light on this.
Okay, Charles. Yes, we'll have fun with this because, yeah, it prompts a lot for people to better understand because it is a lot. And you got a couple parts to your question there. So the first part of your question is, what is the first part of your question? Second part is, well, anyhow, what is the first part again?
The first part is that I'm just curious to know how the real guides who came to this earth, just like as we've done, and they had to work through all the restrictions and limitations on this level until they gained their status of they became the real guides of life. And then at that time was there this concept of the is, and if so, why is it only coming into fruition now? And if this concept of the is was not known by them, so how did they evolve?
Okay. All right, let's keep it as simple as possible because it gets a little confusing, simply because most people are very well taught to be literal, okay? And through this literalness that was purposely created, the English language is really reptilian. And so, but it's okay. Everything's okay. But you have to understand what you're working with. So, just like anything in your life, if you have an illness or whatever, you can take all kinds of things and think, okay, well, it's working. But really, you have to understand what you're working with. And so, backing up a little bit, but it's all here and now. What's really cool about life is it is truly here and now. But in the literal sense, it has these, you might say, proportions or identities or situations that are supposedly created, like Peter was mentioning, the flat earth. Does it really matter if it's flat or round? No, it doesn't, because you're always you're standing upright, you're here and now, so what does it matter if it's flat or round? It really doesn't matter. And so again, this literal sense has basically taken over most of the world as we know it. This is the world that we live in here. And so you have these created oppositions to it too, because really the literal sense is mainly ideas and not the true reality that's taken place with everything through creation and the true reality itself. It's not it. It's just a literal sense of ideas that people create and say, oh, I believe this, I believe that, I like that, I don't like that, this is good, that's bad, that's up, that's down. This is a literal sense of things. And for the most part, as we see the world, how screwed up it is, and confused and distorted, it really doesn't altogether relate. Some things do. We take into hand, we grow food, we breathe, we do different things. We relate to our five bodies, mainly the emotional body. Most people are in love with that body, which is fine. It's choice.
Okay.
You know, the isness of life has always been. This is what's amazing. That's the only word I can use. Amazing and awesome about how life is. And we are waking up through the literal senses right now simply because this is what has been created. There's many avenues to wake up to this reality, and it always is. And as you really see this isness, you will see the wholeness life is. And yes, we're all going through the process, you might say, of life itself for what it is. And really, it doesn't matter, what you recognize with life. You're in some way in relationship to this isness, and you decide how to recognize it. So again, do you want to see the difference? You really have to ask the question, do you really want to see the difference between the created literal side or sense of things? In other words, we think that this is common sense because, we can start our car, and we can drive down the road, and we can stop at red and green lights and go and whatever. Okay, that's the literal sense. So we're thinking, okay, this is how life is. And as we see it, and we create buildings and freeways, and we plant trees here and there, and we have supermarkets with food and all that, we're seeing a literal sense here. We're seeing a created world that we basically continue, most people basically continue to think is life itself, but it's really a created situation. But again, to really see the isness life is, to really see it, because it's just a seeing and being is what it is, and it's all here and now. It's with everything. Is has nothing to do actually with the literal self, but the literal self. Yeah, with your literal self, you can create a relationship, you might say. Okay. So it's just like man and woman. You create a relationship is what you do. But they are still both what they are, aren't they? They're very similar, okay? But they really are different in so many ways. And this is how the the isness, what I call the real universe, is this is just giving it something to describe it, and creation itself and the process that we decide and how we decide to create. It's all very interesting, and it's all, it all has potential when it is recognized. So just like a person driving down the road, when they recognize how to use the gas and the brake and the steering wheel and the sense about themselves to be able to drive, things go accordingly, don't they? But when they don't have that sense, when they don't know what they're doing, if they're afraid and they forget which is the gas pedal and which is the brake, then all kinds of funny things happen, don't they? So there is a difference to things. And this is what we're seeing in the world today. We have this huge literalization where people accept ideas that are distortion, and it doesn't work. But people think that it works. And so again, this isness is of a particular, and so it is a huge difficulty. It is huge, really it is. And those that have had many experiences on the real side, as I was brought up in this through Paul and Eckankar in the old days, etc., all these so-called higher initiates and whatever that seem to know something, but really they were just reciting words. That's really all they were doing. is reciting words. And it sounded good. And it was the start. Just like when we were in first and second, third grade, hey, we talked a lot. We shared ideas. We mainly shared ideas. That's really what we shared. You don't see first and second, third graders going out there, digging in the earth, growing food, calculating the weather and all these things that deal with the reality of the planet that supports them. No, you don't. You see them in a room, a big box, that looks good with a lot of funny stuff on the wall. And you got the teacher there who's been literalized too, and she's teaching the children. Teaching them what? Ideas. Sound good ideas. And so this is what you grow up with. And so as you go through whatever you do, looking for whatever you're looking for, but, and the idea for most people is truth, okay? And so if you do find us by looking for truth, lucky you, because we have nothing to do with truth, you see? Because realistically, everybody has their personal truth. So you can go to anybody and ask them what is what, and they're going to give you their personal truth. So much for truth. And just like in the courtroom, when you put your hand on the Bible, okay, is that truth? Is that the absolute truth? Do you swear that it is? You see, these are ideas. And what is real truth? Well, that is the isness. And so we find a particular here, and that is that this is everything. Okay, everything that is the isness. And so how is it that you see this and relate to this reality? Well, here's a hint also, and that is that everything that you've been through has credibility. It really does. But here's the other side of it. It doesn't have any credibility at all. And when you see that for what it is, even though you've been through all these spiritual paths and you've been the seeker and you've searched for all these things and whatever, it really sounds good, doesn't it? And I've heard this so many times, and you got all these initiations and you've got degrees, you got master's degrees, PhDs, all these things. You've really built up yourself and you've really become literally self-convinced by all of this, which, yes, does have a relationship here. One-dimensionally, that's it. It doesn't go beyond this. You can go to the moon, even in this realm here, even in this solar system, and it means nothing unless you're a scientist or something and it relates accordingly. But other than that, no, it means nothing. And so as people come into this, just like anything, they need to see what they've been through, then let it go. And then start anew and go on the new discovery. You see, that's really how it is. So again, I wrote this is a roundabout, Charles, but I'm getting there, but it's very important. I wrote another group yesterday, and it's called What is the New Nowness? And in it, I provided a question. So it's kind of like this: the first day that a person, they've gone through everything, they've gone through their schooling, their colleges and whatever, then at some point they decide, as an example, to be a doctor. And the first day in medical school, the student asked the professor, well, professor, how do you become a doctor? And then the professor, again, it's kind of a funny question. In other words, the person is assuming, or they're asking the question, but at the same time, they're assuming that they already know. It's like, well, I kind of get the idea here that, telling the professor that I kind of get the idea of what a doctor is, professor. But then at the same time, the person is asking the question, how do you become a doctor? So in other words, the person is asking themselves from their assumption. Does that make sense? This is how literalized the world has become. We're asking ourselves about the inventions of literalism that we agree to, and it doesn't work. This is where people go from point to point to point to point to point, and they don't find it because it's not there. It's not in any literal sense. And so here is where the real guidance comes in from the real guides, and that is that when you take the time to sing the new you and recognize the real guides, then things start to happen and you suddenly start to see what's taking place in your real awareness, but you must at the same time learn to let go of that literal side. So your question comes around to the reality life is, and that is that this isness has always been now, and it is just now that the possibility exists for people to wake up, to recognize it. There's no guarantee with that. There's no guarantee with anything. Okay, guarantees are inventions of the mind, because just like the air we breathe, there's no guarantee with it. It can be there one day, and the next day it won't be. And we're seeing that very rapidly here, how the oxygen and everything is destroyed. And one day it won't be. That's very real. And so who is preparing for that? You know, in the literal sense, people will say, they can just simply say, hey, I don't believe it. Okay, so that just takes care of that, right? So again, it's paying attention to what is real and the reference also, okay? You know, what's interesting is that when Paul came back from the tiger's fane, and we had planned all this for a long time to come in to do this, and this earth here, it had to be some spot, you know, just like where the White House is. A spot was picked where you put the White House, okay? Could be anywhere. You know, it could be in Florida, it could be in California, it could be in Huntington Beach, whatever. But they picked, you know, they created the District of Columbia and put it right there. So again, what has been decided on the earth is because of all the situations that have been created to culminate everything to be what it is, has been brought together right here. Okay, so but in the literal sense, you would try and calculate this. There is no calculation. In other words, we do have those ideas and those identities and those categories, etc. Yes, we do. And they work of a particular. You know, it's like my car, if it's sitting out there, or my bicycle. Yeah, but I don't relate to what the bicycle or the car would consider, or my computer. I relate to what makes sense with the whole of life, and then I, in some way, try and create a relationship into a literal sense so that you and others can understand it. So as we really get into, you know, seeing more than just the literal sense and just agreeing with the literal world only, then this reality becomes more so, but it can only reveal itself. It doesn't grow or anything like that. It's really a revealing is what it is. It's a recognition. And by that very fact, it can reveal itself to you. And so it's kind of like a man in a coma, let's say in the hospital, and he's not recognizing anything, and someone's, you know, standing there, his wife or whatever, above the bed, and talking to him, and saying, "Hello, Charles, are you there? Hello, Charles, come in, Charles." You know, Earth to Charles, and eventually you, excuse me, you slowly come out of your coma, and we've seen this in the movie where they kind of blur the scene a little bit. Then all of a sudden, you know, you see that head above you in the bed. Many movies you've used that scene, and all of a sudden, you know, it gets clearer and clearer, and you recognize the person, and you hear what they're saying. And that's kind of what it is for this, to recognizing this true reality too. But at the same time, you may think, okay, well, this is fine, but you know what? I want to go back to sleep. I'll see you later. So it's like clunk, you go unconscious. And this is how it is in the literal sense of this world also. And that is, most people want to stay unconscious. They don't want to make the effort to see what is more real. So they continually confuse themselves with their literal ideas, asking questions that really do not relate to the true reality life is. But you ask one here, and it's part of the adventure, and we're in this adventure. And simply because, I'll say it this way, and that is that The reason that this is here is because of me, because I decided this from the is. It's all my adventure. But most people won't understand that. So I really can't say it out like that because, again, it sounds like an egotistical this or that. But it's not that. It has nothing to do with that. And it's not about me. But I decided it. You know, it's just like a football team. You know, somebody has to decide the play, don't they? And everybody on the team is great. They're all, you know, they're undoubtedly better than, you might say, in a way, the quarterback that's deciding the play. Because you got the ends and the center and all these tough guys. You got the front linemen or whatever. These guys are big. They're tough, you know. They can pick up anybody and throw them around, you know, as you might say. But somebody has to decide, okay, the adventure and how to do this. And I decided it. That's why it is now. Simply because at some point it was decided. And if you were to look at it in the time frame of a literalness, it would be a long, long time ago, you know, more than you can even consider. But here it is now, because this is how awesomely endless life is. And when you really let go of those questions, not your questions, but questions that do not relate to what makes sense in this world, and creations that do not make sense, then you will maybe start to see it a little by little. And I would suggest this: do not take it for granted, because you will never completely see it, no matter what you think or whatever. And people that do the blanket idea of the generalizations like love is all and blah, 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 no, they do not see it. Because for the most part, they're relating to their personal love ideas, which is fine, but it has nothing to do with the whole of life. There is a difference. So each person must discover their relationship. And these individuals that I call the real universal guides, and they've played many roles. They have played many, many roles. And they did stand with Paul when he was here. And he termed them as act masters at the time. Well, that was the role they played. Just like Charlton Heston played Moses, he played Ben-Hur, and he played a lot of other roles, etc. He played many roles, but it was still Charlton Heston. But he played many roles. And so do the guides, the real guides. And in this one-dimensional sense, literal sense, people get stuck on identities instead of seeing the true reality of what is. So this is where you become the risk taker or not, or you go with your personal mind. And most people, they will come, they will take some of this knowledge, and they will go and they'll just say, well, it's like everything else, there's nothing here. Well, fine. It's a choice. Everything is a choice. I chose to do this. I chose to take the risk and come here and bring this into a world that doesn't want anything except its own self-destruction. That is the biggest challenge ever. Yeah, we could have picked a planet that's total la-la land, okay? And where everybody's happy and wonderful, etc., and giggling all the time and, you know, loves each other. Okay, the end result would be, why would they give any of that up, you might say? And it's not really giving anything up. It's really not. It's just that, you know, in the literal sense, it's hard to term these things. Why would they, you might say, change their ways or look to anything else because of what they already have? They're already fine. So again, but yet here's a planet that's destroying itself and everybody's in chaos basically and dumbed down, stressed and everything else, diseased, destroyed many times over and coming back. Why would we pick a planet like this? Simply because this is where you're going to get it if you're ready. This is where you're going to see it, and you will supersede any happiness or any joy, thrill, or whatever sensations that come along with this place. I'm not saying you're going to stop eating and not enjoy this or that once in a while, or relationships or whatever. That's not the idea. You do whatever you want. You decide your journey. You figure it out. But here it is through what is taking place right now. because it's like the old saying, ready or not, here it comes. So again, this is how life is. Surprise, it's here. Because it has to be now or it doesn't happen. And so this is what's so cool about it as you recognize what's really taking place. And it is that recognition that's very important. And how did the guides become how they are, etc.? Well, they took on the risk to earn their way and gain this recognition of what is really taking place. And they kept at it and at it and at it, and they don't stop. They're very adamant about it. Very, very adamant. They're so adamant that when you see them on the real side many times, you'd almost think it's one of the bad guys because they're so very focused on what is, because that's all that matters to them, like the sun shining. You can wave to the sun, you can jump up and down, you can throw rocks on it, you can shoot guided missiles at it, but does it care? It doesn't care. It's so indifferent to everything that you do. And this is really how it really is. But once you recognize this indifference and perceive what's taking place, you'll see this awesomeness better than, the word bliss and all these things have been used. It's better than that. Bliss is simply another sensation. It's just so real that there is nothing that encumbers you at all. And so this is what these individuals have put themselves through uniquely, and they're simply shining suns, and this is what they do. Okay, so again, in our literal one-dimensional world, we see these things like what Paul brought out, teachings and paths and religious, spiritual, and all these funny things. Well, that's fine, but we've went through that. That's why the new presentation, realistically, I picked a label that has nothing to do with any of that, because it doesn't. Those are ideas that people have become absorbed in, and they're all one-dimensional. They don't really go anywhere except in creation. They continually rotate in creation, and for the most part, you look at any of these things, galactic or whatever, they're all the same. They're just exchanging ideas. But what we're doing here, what is being done and implemented, what I'm deciding to do creates a relationship to this reality so you can succeed and stand real, okay? It's no more working for God, okay, and all this nonsense, okay, and praying and worshiping to the gods, which are really the reptilians. It is standing real, side by side, you might say, and facing each other and recognizing this awesomeness where you do not have any restrictions, and at the same time, you have a total relationship with all of life without distortion. So, yes, it's a process that we're all going through. And the real guides and the true silent ones, etc., and all this, yes, they are constantly going through it too, from whatever position they're in. And I would say those that can recognize what's taking place right here, because it's exceptional. It's lucky you that you can see this. And again, it's not about anyone. It's about the isness life is. And all these cute little creative ideas that people have considered, well, that's fine, but it's not it. You really have to see it and be it. And that, again, that's the best part. Remember when we were kids? Can some of you remember? And that is that we didn't consider anything. We just did what we did. And this is what it's about. You just do what you do, and you learn to see what you can see from it. And then all of a sudden, you do see it. You see, and there's nothing you can do with it. It's not a commodity. Okay, so again, if I wanted to produce something that equaled a commodity, I would have done what Joni and Harry did, you see. I would have dumbed down people and used them as slaves. just like the world controllers are, and make it look good too, really market it good, just like everything in this world. Even the Dalai Lama and all them, that's all marketing ploy. They're all part of the human farming. They really are. Yeah, they can be good people, but good to what extent? And so Anton asked the question yesterday about, kind of in the area of positive thinking and what have you. It's like if I keep thinking better and better and better, will it get better? Well, I'm sure certain things will, but it still has nothing to do with the isness life is, because that's indifferent to all your literal thinking. But yet you still do that at the same time. I'm still thinking thoughts and doing things while I'm here, but at the same time I can see what's taking place, and I'm continually, you might say, working the systems of the world that have been created to keep people distorted, working them around like a Rubik's Cube to try and line certain things up so that people have an opportunity to just get a little glimpse of what I'm presenting here for everyone. It's about everyone. That's the best part. And so, yes, Charles, somewhere in there is kind of an answer to your question. And I thank you for asking it, because it prompts me. And I know that's long, but it's just very, very real. And so it's just not words that I'm saying. They become realities because the isness and the boys stand with me to present this. That makes the difference. A politician can go up there and say the same words. And I've seen it on the real side, where people will use what I'm presenting and what have you. And guess what? It won't work, because of their intent and their awareness, and basically their created consciousness, because usually it'll be brought down to that. They'll look at how to market it in a particular way. Well, if a person is really sincere, like I am, why would I want to create something different? So it's like when Paul was here, I didn't go out and create something else. He was the guide. The guides had chosen him. Why would I go create something else and say, well, this is it too, and then use the hue and these other things? Why would I do that? Why not learn from him and stand real with him? Well, that's what I did. So if people want to take what I've done and go out there and create something else, and they can think that, oh, the guides are with us, like Vardencar and the Way of Truth and all these other things, it's fine, but are they really there? No, they're all being attacked, and they're all tap-lined. Because, again, it doesn't work like that. The boys have focused, we've all focused, to present something very real and genuine and sincere with real intent, that when it becomes duplicated, that's all you get. It's duplication. So, again, look to the real side. And it takes a while, many times, to get that confirmation. Sometimes people get something right away if they're ready to see it. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people don't really want to see it, even though they think they do, okay? Because that's their literal part, searching for it. This is where I suggest to learn to be very sincere and take a look at your intent. It's very, very important what your intent is. And again, most people are surfacey, just like, oh, love is all. Okay, that's easy to say. Oh, I love the world. I love this. And I want the world to be happy. And why can't we have peace on earth? Again, these are surfacey ideas, and it ain't going to happen. This is a war zone. And, people have free will. Again, you have to see how free will works. And so this is where, again, the systems, the ruling systems, they're deciding for others what is good for you. And is it? I would say, no, it's not. But when each individual learns to recognize this true reality in the true sense of really what it is sincerely, purely and sincerely, then things begin to show up and reveal themselves as life really is, without all the restrictions and the nonsense that we're dealing with here. But this is the challenge. And what is taking place here is part of the overall wake up. So lucky you, you're here at this very moment.